Welcome to the Kino Cave, and we're back to the X-Men reviews again with X-Men The Last Stand. Just up front, do not get used to the hat. I'm wearing it because it is hot and my hair gets in front of my eyes when I sweat. Don't get used to it. Whenever I watch X-Men The Last Stand, I always kind of go back and forth on whether or not I actually like it. Because there's a lot of stuff that I really love, and there's a lot of stuff that's also really mediocre. And honestly, as I was watching the film, I'm like, this is not great, like on paper. But even now, after a few days since seeing it, I can only really remember the good stuff. So it's really hard to judge this movie. I do have all my thoughts written down, like that I wrote down straight after watching it. So there's not going to be much rose tinted glasses here. But again, it's really tough to properly judge X Men The Last Stand because I think it's just so much of it is so enjoyable that it's just kind of an easy watch. Can't believe I have to say this again and for a different filmmaker, but of course, none of my praise for this film goes towards Brett Ratner. For one thing, the guy is a really mediocre filmmaker, and for another thing, he's done some horrible things to people, so I won't get into it, but yeah, none of my praise is directed at Brett Ratner. One thing I noticed about this movie right off the bat is that almost every character from the previous films are introduced with way less reverence than they were in X Men 2. What I really liked about X2 is that every character was reintroduced with this reverence and also seamlessly with this great continuation. But in this, they're kind of just thrown in there, like Professor X just thrown in there in a flashback, and Magneto is the same. He's just kind of there, and Scott Summers just like being a whiny baby, and it's so many of these characters they're just thrown back in, and it's like, yay, they're here. Weirdly enough, it's new characters that are introduced are actually given more play. So I'm getting into spoilers straight away. This movie is like nearly 20 years old, so straight off the bat, Charles Xavier is way less likable and a lot meaner in this movie than he is in the previous two movies. You do get this sense that he's kind of a little bit of a tough principal in the first two films, but in this he's just downright rude and mean, especially when he's trying to defend what he did with Jean Grey. I get that that's like a whole thing, and it's the idea of like breaking down this heroic and presidential almost figure. But when he's been so kind of nice and so understanding in the first two films, and then straight off the bat with this one, he's just mean and rude and like does not give anybody else a chance to fight him on anything. It just comes off really strangely, and then he just up and dies like halfway through the film. And I hope that screenshot stays up, but if it doesn't, I'm gonna have to like get rid of the TV altogether. Okay, so yeah, Charles's death is treated with very little reverence again. He just kind of gets Thanos'd, and honestly, it's more funny than for fuck's sake. It's treated as more funny than anything else, and yeah, it's just unfortunate. Like, I didn't feel anything when he died, which is weird because I love Patrick Stewart as this character. But he gets a much more emotionally satisfying death later on in the series. Stay tuned for that. That fade in and out thing is so annoying. What I found interesting in this film is the characterization of Wolverine, because it's pretty obvious that Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is the main character of this series. I mean, even in the new Deadpool movie, he's being treated with this insane amount of hype and reverence, which is like paling in comparison to, say, Kelsey Grammer's Beast, who came into the end of the Marvels, which looks like shit anyway, and also Professor X in that Doctor Strange movie, which was also just, I mean, that whole scene is just a bundle of mediocrity. But anyway, let's move away from that and more focus on our X-Men movies. He's treated as a main character because he has been in the previous two films, but his arc is done, so he doesn't have as much to do. All he's got really is the love story with Jean, which was kind of only hinted at in the previous films, and in this one it's treated like it was a big plot point because the whole thing about Logan's past and him trying to figure that out, that was solved. It really feels like, at the start of the film, Logan literally says, "Look, I'm just a sub. I'm just here." And that should have been the way it was for the whole movie. He's just there, he's doing his thing, the love story between him and Jean is like hinted at, and maybe he does the thing at the end, the "I love you" when he stabs her, which is brilliantly acted from Hugh Jackman and Famke Janssen. I apologize if that pronunciation is incorrect. That's just how it makes sense in my head. But Famke Janssen, terrific actress as well. But Wolverine's arc is just kind of done, so I don't see why he's given this main character treatment in this film. And I'll get into more of that later on with Storm's character, because I got a lot to say about that. Unfortunately, Logan's relationship with Rogue is just dead. They have like one scene together, or at least only one significant scene together, when she goes to him about whether or not she should get the cure. I don't even remember that scene, to be honest. I couldn't tell you much about it because I was so checked out at that point. It sucks that we started the series with such a great foundational relationship in Wolverine and Rogue, and it kind of keeps going in the second one, but it's just dead on arrival in this one, and it's kind of upsetting, like, because seeing how well it was treated in that first film, I would have loved to see this carried on all the way up until Days of Future Past, or maybe even Logan, but unfortunately, it just wasn't. So this is hilarious. Despite being a major, major character in this film, Jean Grey is still really underdeveloped. This is like the most important storyline in this movie is like the Phoenix Saga, that they're tackling the big Phoenix Saga storyline. I'm nearly at the point in the animated series where they're covering that, and it's like 5 episodes, so I think I'm just going to watch that as a full movie and judge that based on itself. Unfortunately, I've not read the original comic book. I do want to get to it at some point. My reading list for comics is like crazy long at the moment, so I will get to reading the Phoenix Saga because it does seem really interesting, and it's held up as one of the best storylines in all of comic books. So seeing how it's treated here with all of that in mind, again, Jean Grey is such an underdeveloped character. Like, she had basically nothing in the first film. She was just part of a love triangle. In the second film, again, she was just part of a love triangle, and she dies at the end, and yeah, it's great, and it's sad, and all that. And then she just comes back in this one and is treated as Magneto's lackey for the whole thing. Like, again, how is she such a major character, but she's given so little character development? It's kind of amazing that they managed to pull that off. I just wrote down Scott Summers deserves better because, yeah, like, he's so cool in, like, every other X-Men thing outside of the films, and I fear that, like, in the new, or like whenever they decide to do MCU X-Men movies, that Scott Summers will be treated with even less reverence, because he's given literally nothing here. He's a sad boy, he goes to Alkali Lake, and he just dies, and that's it. Sorry, James Marsden. I mean, I know James Marsden didn't want to be in the movie anyway because he wanted to go be in Superman, which didn't work out well for him either. But I mean, yeah, really unfortunate for Scott Summers. Okay, this is probably my biggest problem with the film, aside from the maybe having too many plots. Storm's character. Storm is given the least amount of character development out of all the X-Men throughout the first 3 films. She's got one pretty good scene in X-Men 1. She's got virtually nothing in X-Men 2. And in X-Men 3, they hint at giving her a bit more of character. And I was like, this is great. X-Men 3 starts out with kind of Charles Xavier hinting like, oh, you might become the new principal and leader of the X-Men when I'm gone and stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. They're foreshadowing Storm becoming the big heroic leader of the X-Men. But then, after Charles dies, she gives a speech and that's great. But then, when it comes to the titular last stand, it's Wolverine that gives the big inspirational speech and, like, leads them all into battle. What the hell? Give that job to Storm. Give her a little bit of development for once. She's got nothing. And, to my recollection, she's got nothing throughout the rest of the films either. It's really unfortunate. Like, this woman is basically a god, and she's given very little to do in these films. So, yeah, that's one I really hope that gets rectified in later X-Men movies, is like beyond the Fox movies, that Storm gets a bit more to do, because I was really excited when they kind of hinted at her becoming the new leader after Charles Xavier goes, and they just do nothing with it. There's not much to say on the kids. They're reduced to a pretty shitty love triangle. Rogue has her plotline with the Cure, which in a better movie could have been better developed. I've got a whole section on if this were a better movie, but I'll get to that. Iceman is given a bit, but not much. Again, it all comes down to a love triangle between Iceman, Kitty Pryde, and Rogue, which is also not developed at all. It's nice to see Elliot Page, who was Ellen Page at the time, but I'm going to refer to them as Elliot because that's who they are now. It's cool to see them, in an X-Men movie, and in fairness, Kitty Pryde is given a lot more to do in the later films, which I'm happy about. Actually, it's only one later film, but still, I'm happy about it. Just a little bit more on Ian McKellen as Magneto. I mean, it's Ian McKellen as Magneto. Like, absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, though, the writing does not support this incredible performance. Like, Charles always wanted to build bridges. That line does not make sense in that context. It's spoken really well, and like he's given several speeches, and I'm like, you're acting this really well, but the content of the dialogue is not good at all. It's just unfortunate, but at least his performance saves it. And to be fair, it was cold as hell when he left Mystique after Mystique was, cured. When he's just like, "You're not one of us anymore." And I'm like, holy shit, that is fucking brutal, man. She, like, stood by you through thick and thin since the Michael Fassbender days, and, like, just dropped her like a sack of spuds, didn't you? One thing on Mystique, though, unfortunately, the last time we see Rebecca Romijn, I think she handled the role really well across the 3 films that she's in. But one thing about her characterization, I don't think she would have betrayed Magneto, because it's shown that she betrays Magneto after he leaves her. I still don't think she would have done that. I think she would have supported the mutant cause, or at least Magneto's idea of the mutant cause, to the very end. I think that her beliefs would outweigh her love for Magneto. Just a little character thing that I don't really agree with. I'm getting to more positive stuff later on, I swear, but giving Magneto his powers back at the very end of the film, what are you doing? Like you take them away, and it's really a really powerful moment, and then at the end you're just like, oh well, they're back, I guess. I mean, come on. Like, it's just lazy writing, isn't it? Like, that's all it is. It's just, well, we kind of need to restore the status quo just enough so we can make more of these. So just let them move a thing at the end. Coming to my biggest positive with this film. Beast. My fucking boy, Fraser Crane as Beast. So, I'm like currently on my first watch through of Frasier, the TV show. And, Kelsey Grammer is the titular Frasier. And it's like rocketing up to being like one of my favorite sitcoms ever. Frasier is so awesome. And if you're going to talk about Frasier in the comments, please don't spoil anything, because I'm only on season 10. I need to get to the end of Frasier, but holy shit. Because you watch Frasier in the show Frasier, and you're like, this is just Beast from X-Men, because I was also watching the 90s X-Men show, and I'm like, Beast in this show is just Fraser Crane, but blue. And then you watch Kelsey Grammer as Beast. This might actually be one of the best castings in the comic book movie. This is up there with J.K. Simmons as Jameson. It's perfect, and the fact that we only really get him in this movie, we get him a little bit in Days of Future Past, and then we get a shittier version of him in the Marvels. It's fucking criminal. Fraser Crane as Beast. It is so good. He's so well spoken. He plays it perfectly because he just plays it like Frasier. He gets action in there, which is awesome. You've got the bit behind me where he's trying to put on the jacket, and you know he's still got the well-spoken mannerisms about him. It's fucking perfect. I would watch 10 movies just with Kelsey Grammer as Beast. He's that good. He's like the biggest redeeming factor for this film. Getting into other side characters that are introduced in this, Multiple Man is surprisingly charismatic, considering he only has like 2 moments. Again, I would watch an entire. Do you know what? I would watch a movie, right? I want this X-Men movie to happen. Probably can't happen anymore because it's been too long, but I want to live in a universe where the X-Men movie happened, where Beast is the title character, and it's just about Beast, and it's Kelsey Grammer playing Beast, the way he would play Fraser. And Multiple Man's just the bad guy because he's got insane charisma. Like, I love the bit where he's just like, you got me. Like, I don't know, does anybody... Someone else has to think this, right? That Multiple Man just has an insane amount of charisma. Like, that actor has an insane amount of charisma for such a small role. I just wrote, Juggernaut is awful. Because he is. Like, I like Vinnie Jones. He's a good actor. Like, he's good at stuff. He's good at being this, like, big British brawler. I can't believe I managed to get that line right in the first go, but yeah, Juggernaut is just not it for him. He's wearing a terrible muscle suit. Everything he says grates in my brain. He's just terrible. He's got a fucking mortar and pestle head. Like, oh god. He did give us a great meme though, didn't he? Just speaking generally on the story, it's a mess. And there's way too many plot lines. They tried to adapt like every X-Men story in one film. Like, they tried to do Mutant Cure and the Phoenix Saga and like more stuff with Magneto, and just they tried to do so much in a 2-hour runtime. If they'd focused on any one of these stories, the film would be instantly much, much better because you would have allowed each of these storylines to breathe. But this is the, like, people say Spider-Man 3 has too much going on. No, this film has too much going on. So this is a little section that I'm probably not going to repeat for many films, but it's called In a Better Movie. And it's everything that happens in this movie that would have been better if it was in a better movie. Or at least a more comprehensible film. So, in a better movie, Rogue's plotline with the mutant cure would have been really interesting. But she gets like 2 or 3 scenes where she talks about it. And again, it's a really interesting idea of like... Because you've got the conflict of mutants like Storm, whose powers are 1, really cool, 2, not detrimental to everyday life, and 3, don't affect her appearance. Saying that, you know, mutants don't need cures, and that you're perfect just the way you are. But then, what if you're like Beast, and being a mutant makes it really difficult for you to blend into ordinary society? And what if you're like Rogue, where being a mutant is an active drain on your personal life? It's a really interesting concept, but it's not explored at all in this film, because there's also the Phoenix Saga to worry about, and the love triangle, and the Magneto stuff, and Xavier's death, and all these characters and villains and everything. In a better movie, Magneto being cured at the end would have been really fucking poignant. The idea of Magneto being cured and being, as Wolverine says, just like everybody else, is really interesting. But we gotta get to the Dark Phoenix plotline and wrap that up really quick, so we can't do it justice. Magneto's character can't be given too much justice in this film because we have to worry about all the other plots. That's what this whole like part of the review is boiling down to, by the way. It's just there's too many plots, so we can't focus on this thing. But yeah, I wish I'd felt more when Magneto was given the mutant cure, because it obviously would break his entire philosophy. In a better movie, Logan killing Jean would have been really fucking powerful. And the acting from both actors is absolutely fantastic. But I don't feel any of it because they don't focus on it enough. So our themes of the X-Men being allegories for various marginalized groups it's still there, but it's severely toned down in favor of plot, which I do not agree with at all. I would have much preferred our themes to be explored rather than our plots. But at least you got good stuff there, like with Angel. I think Angel is the most clear exploration of themes in this film. You open with him trying to cut his wings off, which is a fucking brutal scene. But it's, I imagine, very relatable for a lot of people who struggle with their identity, which, yeah, there's a whole lot going on there, and it's really interesting. But you know, again, it's two scenes. Isn't that a little bit like when Mystique is her first scene in the film, and they refer to her as Raven, and she calls that her slave name? I don't need to make that connection for you. I think you can make it yourself. And as I said before, the mutant cure. Now it's just doing anything. Hang on. Oh shit. Stupid YouTube ruining my videos. So as I said before, the mutant cure is really interesting also. The idea that there's a conflict there of the mutant cure is obviously very insulting for mutants who have really cool powers, but for some mutants it could be a serious option for them when it's a drain on their personal life. Like with Rogue, she can't touch anybody physically. That would be something that'd be very difficult to deal with, and the mutant cure provides a solution to that. Just little filmmaking stuff. There's some wonky CGI. The de-aging is actually pretty okay for 2006, but I'd rather they didn't do it at all. And otherwise, yeah, there's some wonky CGI throughout. The cinematography and the visuals overall, though, they're just kind of bland. Like, really bland, overexposed visuals. And it seems that Brett Ratner has never seen a camera lens before, because the amount of shots in this film that are just overexposed to hell. This one's actually fairly okay, but some of the ones in the X-Mansion are insanely overexposed to the point where you can barely see what's going on in the scene because the daylight is so bright. I'll try and find a screenshot to put up. The score is okay, but it's no John Ottman, unfortunately, and it's kind of just absent for most of the film. You see a little bit of like a main theme coming in there, but again, it's not John Ottman, is it? The Iceman Pyro fight is pretty cool. I like how it's kind of set up pretty much from the first film, really. They're a little bit of a rivalry, and it's ramped up in the second. It finally comes to a head in this film when they're having that fight, and you get Iceman doing the full Iceman look with the skin and stuff, and you know, the actor, I forgot his name in the last video. I can't remember it in this video either, but the actor who plays Iceman is really good in that moment as well. There's some memorable moments, like I love the "come on" guy. Like, he's just great, isn't he? And of course we get the meme of the Juggernaut bitch. That one's pretty funny too. It's great meme. Great that we got a meme out of that terrible fucking character. So yeah, that was my review for X-Men: The Last Stand. It's been a roller coaster of a review for a movie. So much to talk about. Such a mess of a film. As I said at the start, like, I'm aware, after finally like saying all these words that I've written down, I'm aware that this is like, there's a lot of bad. Like, I focused on a lot of the terrible stuff in this film, but again, the longer it's been since I've seen it, the more fondly I look back at it. Like, you know, the fight at the end is pretty cool looking, and Beast is awesome, and Ian McKellen is awesome, and you know, the costume for the Dark Phoenix is cool, and the acting is great from Hugh Jackman and everybody, and Halle Berry's wig is very wig, isn't it? Like, it's really difficult to hate this movie. Like, honestly, it's kind of just, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? Like, it's a fun comic book movie from the 2000s. All that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please stick around. I'm going through all the X-Men movies, and next, you thought I was negative in this one. The next one is X-Men Origins Wolverine, so that one will be a bit of fun to revisit. Stick around for that in the video after next. I'm doing this every second one so that I don't just fall into the trap of being a channel that only focuses on one thing. Otherwise, subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it. I'll try and fix that shit with the TV. And subscribe for more unhinged videos just like this one. I hope you all have a great day.